when we get into, what is PTSD? Basically, we're talking about readjustment disorder. Essentially, PTSD is what's embedded into our DNA. Something happens, whatever it is, some sort of traumatic event. We see a saber-tooth tiger, we touch the stove, things like that. And so, from a survival standpoint, it embeds, we learned a lesson, right? It embeds into our DNA and we pass it down through generations. Because what is the benefit? I had a gentleman ask me, is there any benefit to having, this kind of trauma? Yes, from a survival standpoint, you learn what's dangerous and you learn how to identify it farther back at an earlier time. And so it helps to keep you safe, right? And then it allows you to grow and change your decisions and what you're doing. And that keeps us alive. It keeps us away from, the saber-tooth tigers. It keeps us away from, things that are poisonous because we learn from that point. It becomes PTSD when we're no longer able to balance the reason and the benefit of that and separate, delineate the negatives from that. When it becomes a disorder, right, is when we're no longer able to balance the good from the bad and be able to separate the cognitive voice. Where it becomes a disorder is when we can no longer manage the positive effects versus the negative effects, the disassociation, the isolation, the temper dysregulation, all the cliche bad shit that goes along with PTSD. That's where it becomes a disorder, and it starts affecting us when we can't control it. In order to be able to control the outcome of the trauma response, we have to be able to identify, okay, what are my behaviors, what are the triggers, and exactly how am I responding to this trauma? Now you can start delineating, is this a positive or is this useful? Is this a bad thing? Is it causing bad shit to happen to me and by extension to other people? So a real simple idea would be, you touch the stove, it's hot. Ow, it freaking hurts, Don't do that again, right? So what's useful is that you learn to detect heat from a greater distance, so you don't have to touch it to realize the damn thing's hot, right? And furthermore, you can use your eyes and realize, hey, that's a stove. It tends to get hot. So when I see that, I'm going to go ahead and be aware of that. So that's the positive. The disorder comes into play, or when you fail to be able to articulate the difference between a stove that's off and not a harm to you and a stove that's on. So when you start realizing that every stove is a serious threat to you, that starts becoming a disorder. So when it comes to people, this is textbook. And my dad is 78 years old. He's got Alzheimer's. He's got dementia. He was drafted into Vietnam. He's an Army vet. He was in Afghanistan. And so as a child, I grew up with that. And he would always make comments about people that when I was a kid, I'm like, whatever, man, that's just somebody just living their life, trying to, pay their bills and go to school, whatever. And then when I come back from Iraq, first of all, I was in Hawaii, so he came to Hawaii to see me. So he was having a really hard time because of the atmosphere and everything, because the terrain looked like Vietnam, the culture looked, so he was tripping out of it. And he was asking me about, if I see how I feel about it. I'm like, I don't feel any fucking way, dude. I don't care. Doesn't matter if no one's a threat until they are, and anybody can be a threat. So where that PTSD is useful is being able to identify trends and trigger markers and things that can tell you, hey, that stove is probably hot, and I want to identify that it's hot from as far back as possible. So then I don't mess with it, or I watch it. If I have to mess with it, I can at least watch it, right? What my dad wasn't able to do is he just assumed every person was potentially a threat to him, because in a scenario in his life, every was a legitimate threat to him, but he was no longer able to disassociate that. And that's where the disorder part comes into play. He's bound by that fear. He's no longer in control of that fear. And that has negative consequences. So that's where the disorder part comes in from, post-traumatic stress disorder.